One of the things I most frequently get asked to do on What's in an OP is analyze the OP of an ongoing series and speculate blindly on what's to come. That sounds fun in theory, but the reason I don't do it in practice is that most anime are adaptations, and I worry that I'll miss something that would be really obvious to a manga or light novel reader. And if I do research to catch everything I could possibly catch, that would kinda defeat the point, wouldn't it? But the new Silver Link Mafia drama, 91 Days, is an original property, so no one will be able to tell me if I'm wrong until the show is over. And the OP is too kick-ass not to cover. So today, I'm gonna do something different and try to predict what's coming next in 91 Days. By the way, if you haven't seen 91 Days yet, I highly recommend it. It's currently streaming on Crunchyroll, and if you go to crunchyroll.com/basement, you can get a 2-week free trial for the service, which is plenty of time to get caught up on the show for this video, and watch a ton of other shows on the side. Drums kick and the OP starts abruptly as our hero Angelo Laguso whips around and points his gun at us, immediately setting the tone for this brutally violent series. But the show has an introspective side to it as well, reflected in this shot of Angelo slowly crossing the bridge to the island in the misty, early hours of the morning. This is perhaps symbolic of his return to the world of the Mafia after years in self-imposed exile. The girders in the foreground pass the camera and become trees rushing by as Angelo sprints frantically through the woods with a pistol in hand, seemingly chased by something. This could be a moment where his plan has gone awry and he has to get away from the Venettis. This notion is reinforced as we transition to a shot of him as a child running away from the massacre at his family home before collapsing in the snow. The implication is that the same threat from back then, Nero Venetti, is chasing him now. This also says something about his character. Though he runs swiftly and with purpose now, on the inside he's still that scared, angry little kid fighting for his life. The memories of that night haunt him to this day. Following this, we see a photo of Angelo's family imposed against a shot of his friend Corteo trying to snuff a candle with his fingers. Alone, this image suggests that Angelo is a lot more bold and courageous than his friend, but with the photo, it takes on a different meaning. Snuffing out a candle is a very obvious metaphor for snuffing out a life, and right after this scene, Angelo's parents are murdered in cold blood. Corteo's hand almost looks as though it's reaching out to snuff Angelo out, but it pulls back, sparing him as he's spared in the story. But what's really interesting about this is that his younger brother, Luce, isn't overlaid with any of the visual elements in the other shot, which implies that he also survived. In that case, a question is raised. Where is he? I'll leave you to ponder that as we move on. We next see Luce running away from his brother, seemingly to get shot and killed, and then Corteo waving as he passes Angelo's father Testa on the road, which is a fateful event in its own right, but extreme emphasis is placed on this unique wave that seems to be special to him and Angelo. I'm not as confident in this as I am that Luce is still alive, but it could be that Corteo was doing some sort of favor for Testa Lagusa, perhaps something to do with the ledger that got him killed, which would make sense of a shot that we're about to see. We see Angelo walking slowly down the street, so slowly that the pedestrians around him go into time-lapse, and he sees phantoms of his family walking through the crowd and disappearing. This indicates that these memories haunting Angelo are keeping time from moving forward for him. Although the disappearing ghost family isn't quite as spooky as this extra who's walking in front of Angelo, suddenly teleporting behind him as he turns. That's some Slender Man shit. Or an animation error, maybe. A tap on the shoulder prompts Angelo to turn around, and suddenly he finds himself standing at the Venetti wedding. This cut indicates that he is in some way out of step with the rest of the world. The hand tapping him on the shoulder could be the person who wrote him the letter that sent him on the path of revenge in the first place. At the wedding, we finally meet Nero, the show's primary antagonist, as well as a grown-up Corteo. The scene is pleasant enough, pretty much your typical wedding reception with the bride and groom fawning over each other, but the bride's brother Vano doesn't seem too happy about this arrangement, and his anger serves as a bridging point to this ominous shot of the dawn. Behind the pleasant veneer of the wedding, this shot tells us, something sinister is going on. Next, we see Angelo and Nero talking, guns in their hands and a bottle of whiskey on the table between them. In this shot, Nero seems to be a little detached, and whatever he's talking about weighs heavily enough on him that he needs to be a little drunk to say it. Angelo, in contrast, isn't relaxed at all. He seems to be sitting stiffly, and though he's not aiming it, his gun seems to be casually trained on Nero. Whatever is on Nero's mind, possibly a confession about the night he killed Angelo's parents, Angelo is only thinking about killing him. Next, we see what is maybe the most telling shot of the whole OP. Corteo turns around to face a mysterious figure, and a close-up of his face flashes on the other person's back. His eyes don't betray any sort of panic, which is odd since we can see from the reflection in his glasses that the figure has a gun pointed at him. In this shot, it looks as though Corteo is doomed to die, which is something most anyone familiar with mob movies could have seen coming a mile away, but whoever's about to shoot him, he's meeting it with resignation and possibly recognition? The silhouette in his glasses isn't entirely clear, but there's only one person with a douchey popped collar like this in the show right now. The mysterious new Orco family enforcer, Fango. Now, it could be that Fango was just sent to kill the supplier of the Venetti's top-notch bootleg hooch, but I don't know, that seems a little too impersonal for this kind of story. I suspect that Fango has a reason to kill Corteo, possibly related to the Ledger, and that reason may be tied to his true identity, Luce Lagusa, Angelo's younger brother. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Fango's clearly been through some shit to come out as messed up as he is. Nobody really knows where he came from, much like Angelo's alter ego Bruno, and he's played way too prominent a role in the story so far to just be some random Goomba. And whipping alone does not explain the scars on his back. Plus, he's got pretty much the exact same haircut as Luce. I don't know, makes sense to me. It's worth noting that Angelo has also worn jackets with flared collars like this in the past, so it's possible he could be the killer too, though a bit less likely. We then jump to the letter that started this whole mess, and from that to a montage of gratuitous violence. An opera singer, clothes soaked in blood, seems to writhe in agony before the audience, possibly a commentary on violence as performance, the act that Angelo is putting on to get closer to the Venettis, or possibly a future victim in the escalating gang war. And man, does it ever escalate. We jump to an explosion on a busy street, then to various shots of Angelo and Nero evading gunfire. But then things ramp down a bit. We see the dawn of the Orco family with guns trained on him, perhaps a coming betrayal or a confrontation with Nero and Angelo. From there, we jump to a shot of a speakeasy from the show, then construction outside a mansion, then Corteo and Angelo meeting somewhere overlooking the island, probably secretly in the dead of night. Lastly, we see a shot of Vanno Venetti's funeral. Many of these shots are lifted straight from the show, which tells me that all of them are slivers of things yet to come. Unfortunately, from still images, it's kind of hard to say what those things might be. Angelo slumps down in a chair, seemingly on the verge of breaking. Hands shaking, he braces his gun against his head, recalling everything that happened to his family and trying to find the resolve to continue. But it's not any of the horrors that he witnessed that spur him to action. It's the photo of Luce, which is blurred by his tears. Maybe it's that the image is fresh in his mind, or maybe it's that Luce reappearing as Fango is what caused him to doubt himself in the first place. There's many possibilities. And there are a few possible interpretations of this next image as well. It's a stained glass shot that, if the internet is right, appears to depict the Bible story of Jonathan handing over his robes and sword to David, forming a covenant in the process. It's kind of weird that two potential kings of Israel would be wearing Roman garb, but this story has been depicted in this way before. The only person with whom Angelo has a covenant like this is Corteo, and given his disposition in the scene, it may be safe to say that he's mourning the death of his friend, which would hit him extra hard if his friend happened to be killed by an assassin who Angelo failed to kill, and who turned out to be his supposedly dead brother. I'm just saying. Angelo stands in the ruins of the speakeasy we saw earlier, hidden away in a huge cathedral. There'll definitely be some sort of big confrontation here in the future, and it's possible that this is where Corteo will die. Following this, we see Fango engulfed in flames in the speakeasy, just like what happens to him in the first episode of the show, and various shots of gangsters shooting up rival establishments, killing enemies in bed, and turning the city into a war zone. It's a brutal celebration of unadulterated violence that hints at a huge gang war to come. And hidden in the middle of it, we see two relevant shots. One of Angelo dodging gunfire after his failed attempt on Fango's life, and one of Fango sneaking up to strangle the driver of a car. Isn't it interesting that in this whole montage, they're the only named characters we see? It's almost like there's some important connection between them. The gang violence transitions into the slaughter of Angelo's family. Then we return to the image of him glaring angrily down the sights of a gun. This framing device puts everything else in context. This OP represents Angelo psyching himself up to do what must be done, and this shot of him is probably taken from close to the end of the series. However, as we pull back, Angelo is replaced once again by his younger self from the beginning, this time hiding, terrified in the closet, because that's who he is inside. Lastly, we see the stylish title card, which combines the graphic design of the Scarface poster and the font of The Godfather into one slick as hell logo. Seriously, props to these graphics designers, and props to the people who made this OP. Normally, I'm not at all fond of OPs that utilize footage ripped straight from the show itself. It strikes me as lazy and limits the potential meaning of the OP, but with tight editing, they've managed to really make it work here. There are a lot of evocative cuts, or at least it seems like there are. It could just be a style over substance OP where they made the most of what they had to work with, and a lot of the meaning that I've ascribed to it could be unintentional. I think there's too much here for this to be coincidental, but I could be wrong. All I'm saying is, if I am wrong, don't blame me, blame them, because I'm perfect. And if you doubt how perfect I am, you should check out my analysis of the opening to Your Lie in April, once the shitstains at Sony Music release their copyright strike on it, that is. In the meanwhile, if the annotation isn't working, you can find a Facebook video mirror in the doobly-doo. Or if you want to see something else Mafia related, check out my very first video, a comparison between the OPs of Bakano and Do-Ra-Ra-Ra. Fair warning, the audio on that is pretty ratchet. If you like this video or those, let me know in the comments, and remember to hit that subscribe button as well as the little gear next to it to turn on notifications so you'll see everything I make forever. And follow me on Twitter at G0FFThu for regular updates about what I'm up to, if you're into that. Before I go, I have to give special thanks to everyone on Twitter who helped me decipher the stained glass image, as well as Reddit user AcuteCat for originally identifying it. And of course, thank you to the generous folks who support the channel on Patreon. You guys are the real gangsters, only without the wanton murder and stuff. I couldn't do what I do without you, and I hope you enjoyed this slightly different take on what's in an OP. With that said, as always, this is Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.